Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or your digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organization. Each and every episode, we sit down with leaders from various fields, just like you're grabbing a cup of coffee with them. We dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, how do I become a better leader? Have you ever thought of that? Have you ever gone through a leadership season where you're looking at your own self-leadership? It's sometimes a question we all ask, but what if we told you that the key to leading others well starts with leading yourself first? I know sometimes that seems like it's backwards, but that's what we're going to talk about today because it's not. Self-leadership is a tremendous opportunity that every leader has. Today, I am joined by Mac Lake, a leadership expert with over 30 years of experience coaching church and organizational leaders. He has a whole string of amazing books out. His latest, Leading Yourself, he lays out these 6 kind of key areas for self-leadership that determine whether you really thrive or you struggle as a leader. So if you're ever stuck, you're unsure how to grow, you're overwhelmed by leadership challenges, I know this conversation, this interview is going to be a great roadmap for you. I have respected Mac for many, many years. He's never met me, but I felt like he has coached me from afar for a long time. Really appreciate him being on the podcast. Mac Lake, thank you so much for being on the Speak with People podcast.
Jason, so good to be with you today. I've been looking forward to this conversation of talking with you, not at you today.
Yes, I love that. That's fantastic. That's absolutely great. Well, for our listeners who don't know more about your story, who you are, could you kind of walk them through who you are, what you do, what's kind of got you to this place?
Yeah. I mean, the important thing is I'm married to Cindy, 38 years, and I have 3 kids and 6 grandkids. That's the most that's the most important thing. But aside from that, man, Jason, I just have a passion for leadership and leadership development because as a young kid, I knew that God had a calling on my life, a purpose for my life. I knew He wanted me to do something, but I was very shy and I was very backwards. And, in middle school, I would hang out in the library, not because I was smart, but because I was shy and didn't want to interact with people. And I was voted the shyest kid in my 9th grade class. But I had this passion to do something with my life. And eventually I made it through the shy stage. I remember I went down in my dad's basement and I would read his books in his library. And prior to my senior year, I pulled a book off the shelf called Winning Friends and Influencing People. And I read the book and man, it just had a drastic impact on my life. And so I went on, pursued my studies, and I was in seminary when a pastor came alongside me, and I don't know why he did this, but he's like, Mac, I want to start meeting with you every Tuesday. So every Tuesday I'd meet with him, and he said, I want to help you grow in your leadership.
Oh, wow.
And nobody had ever done that before. And I knew I struggled in leadership. I knew I wasn't good as a leader. But he started meeting with me every week. And what he said is, I'm going to give you a book. I'm going to give you a CD. I'm going to give you some sort of leadership content. I want you to read it, write down your questions, and I'm going to sit and answer those questions. So Jason, for years, he would sit, or for months, he would sit there and answer my questions. But then after a period of time, he changed things on me. I would ask a question and he would go, now that's a good question. What do you think? And I go, I don't know. And he'd go, no, I want you to answer. And he would make me think. And then a few months later, he changed it even more. He said, what do you think? You're the expert. And so it just had this transformational impact on me, where for the first time in my life, I really understood and began to see myself as a leader and understood what leadership was. I graduated from seminary and I was leading in a church. And boy, I was a leader. I was leading all the children's leaders, student leaders, all the adult leaders, all the worship leaders. I was leading a bunch of leaders. But a year into it, I was like, man, I told my wife, I said, the church is going to fire me. She said, there's no way they're going to fire you. They love you. I said, no, I'm leading so many things. It's all getting ready to come crashing down, but I'm the only one that knows this. And so what I did is I went back and I chose 7 people. I had 88 leaders reporting to me. And so yeah, I chose 7 leaders. I started leading through them and I began to spend my time with them
Mm,
and pouring into them and empowering them. Started doing leadership development for the first time in my life, and it was game changer.
wow.
It probably saved my marriage because I wasn't taking time off. I wasn't taking a day off. I was headed towards early burnout, but leadership development, literally, this shy kid, all of a sudden stepping into leadership and developing other leaders, I became addicted to
Uh,
developing leaders. I love it. So that's my passion today, is just doing anything I can to help leaders reproduce themselves.
wow. Boy, I love that. So much to unpack. But one of the really interesting things is I love how you started your story because 200 or so episodes of the Speak with People podcast, maybe one other leader has included their family in their story. And so I give the
Huh.
same, tell us more about your story, who you are. And so very, very rare, it's just really interesting. So I love that you started with your story. I love that you talked about your wife and your kids and grandkids. And so thank you for that, because I think that's a true, model. We need to talk about our families more often. And I don't know why, maybe that's in corporate spaces sometimes
Yeah.
people just don't, but even in face spaces or those kind of things. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, because it's refreshing, and I love that. It's just absolutely
Thank you.
fantastic. What
Thank
even more to your story, was it hard when you got to that place? Because I know for me in my young 20s, my head didn't seem to fit through doors because I thought so highly of myself. And so was it difficult when you got to that place where, maybe walk us through for a second when it finally just hit you? Wait a minute, I love developing leaders, because what happens is they get more of the applause, they get more of the opportunities, and you're in the background, clapping your hand for them, and so it hurts our pride in our heads sometimes. How was that journey for you?
Yeah, I think for me it's a little different in the sense that I came from a place of insecurity.
Mm,
I came from, such a big part of my story is my pain,
yeah.
is my insecurity. I was confronted early on in my early 20s. I was a youth pastor before I went to seminary, and I was confronted by a group of parents said, we love you, Mac. You're a nice guy. You're just not a good leader. And
Oof.
so yeah, and that was tough, and it was a loving confrontation. It wasn't an angry confrontation. It was one that literally helped change me, and I'm thankful for it. And so, because part of my story is coming from a place of insecurity and pain versus being just a natural leader. I read years ago, I think it's chapter 2 of Maxwell's book. I was in my early 20s and I read this. He said, there are natural leaders and there are learned leaders.
Mm,
And he's learned leaders have an advantage because they understand why they do what they do. And so when I read that chapter, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to be a learned leader because leadership doesn't come naturally to me. So, and that's why I've written
wow.
all these books on leadership, because I literally had to reverse engineer how to lead and figure out how to lead and codify it. And that's allowed me to write all these books on leadership around leadership competencies because I literally had to learn it and codify it for myself. Well,
Hmm.
once you codify it yourself, oh my goodness, I get excited because now I want to give that to somebody else. It's like years ago, I was like, okay, the big question people are wrestling with, how do you create a culture of leadership development? And so I wrestled with that, codified it, and then began to teach it to organizations. And now, we go in and we help organizations build an intentional leadership development strategy. Because here's what I've learned: when you make leadership development intentional, then you can make it reproducible. When
Mm,
it's reproducible, it's unstoppable.
mm,
The problem is most organizations, if they are doing leadership development, which most are not, but if they are, it's an individual doing it based on their intuition,
mm.
not intentionality. So
Right.
what they're doing, they may be successful in developing leaders, but it's not a reproducible process. And so they have so what happens is they have a person that does leadership development, but they don't have a leadership development culture. In
Wow.
order to have a leadership development culture, you have to build a team of people who know how to reproduce leaders. And that's not an easy thing to do. It is an easy thing to do. I shouldn't say that. It is an easy thing to do. Most people don't have the discipline to execute it, to make
Right.
sure they create a culture.
Oh, right. Like you, I was a former youth pastor. So years ago, I can remember when the switch happened as it was after youth group and kids are all over the place. And instead of kids being excited about me, they were excited about their small group leader. And for the first time, I thought, okay, the switch has happened. Like, this is what I
Okay.
want. I don't want all the focus here. I want it on them because we're reproducing and building up other leaders and getting to that place for
Yeah.
some organizations and leaders. What a process, because it's it kind of goes against what we want. Like, we're taught, like, you do the work, you do the work. And so I love that
Yeah.
you're out there teaching organizations how to do that. I love that: intentional, reproducible, unstoppable. What are some thoughts that you have for organizations who are going, okay, we need to produce better, but how can we get to this intentional place? Kind of speak about that intentionality for a second.
Yeah, what we do when we work with organizations, we go in and we say, okay, you got to get a pic. Everything begins by getting a picture of current reality.
Mm.
And so we say, okay, show us your structure, because if you don't have a good structure, then you're going to struggle with development. Most organizations are structured for function; they're not structured for development.
Oh,
And
wow.
so you can see who reports to who, but you can't see what your next step is development wise in the organization. And so what happens, it's like in Major League Baseball. All right. You got the major leagues, you got triple A, double A, single A. Well, you need the same thing in your organization. You need a leadership pipeline. And
Mm.
so what we do is come in, we say, okay, let's look at how you're structured, and then once we get a picture of that current reality, we say, now let's help you build a structure around a leadership pipeline. All right. Some people in your organization are leading themselves. It's those people can flow up and lead others. They can lead a team or a group. Some of those can flow up to lead leaders, and that's leading a subset of like a department. Some of those can flow up to lead a department, and then some of those flow up and lead the entire organization. That's your C suite. And so you got to have that pipeline, and then you put names of people in that pipeline and go,
Yep.
okay, where are we deficient, where do we have an abundance, and then who's got potential, and now what is our intentional strategy. Then you have to go through and define how you're going to do that, and there's a whole
Yeah.
uh, method that we work through on that, but how are we going to develop them and teach everybody to reproduce themselves.
Oh, absolutely amazing, the intentionality. And you brought up baseball. I believe passionately is the greatest sport on the planet. And one of the reasons I live in Tampa, because I'm an hour from 5 different spring training locations.
Oh my
And
goodness.
spring training baseball is the best. Outside of World Series, Freddie Freeman hitting a home run and however many games he did it, spring training ball is just so incredible because you can actually see that intentional process. You've got the rookies who know they're not going to make it, but they're trying to learn what
Yeah.
it takes from the veterans who are calm and who are teaching. You have all the
Yes.
coaches from all those teams. Spring training is such a great a modeling organization for organizations to go, oh, wait a minute, this is how we've got to do this.
It's amazing when I go in and begin to work with these teams. We actually, once we help them define their leadership pipeline, then what we do is we say, now let's put people's names at the different levels. And they're shocked. They are
Mm.
shocked when they see the deficiencies. But the other thing is, on a positive side, they're shocked at the level of potential they see from those people.
Right.
So what we teach them, don't look at people for what they are today. Look at them for what they could be a year
Wow.
from now if you develop them. And then that becomes a game changer. And we help them begin to identify who is in their pipeline, who has potential to move up, what is their next step, and how are you going to get them there. Now all of a sudden you got a talent pipeline that you're developing in your company. And that gets really, really exciting. But here's the thing. Most organizations, CEOs, pastors, whatever, nonprofit president, what they do is they get a budget report every month. And they go, oh, here's how much money came in, here's how much money went out. Okay. How many of them get a people report?
Wow.
Now, which one's the more important asset? I would argue that your people asset is more important than your financial asset. But
Wow.
and if we would manage our money the way we manage our people, we'd be bankrupt in 3 months because we
Wow.
never look at our people pipeline.
Yep. Wow. Wow. Boy, that's profound. It can help many leaders. Let's pivot for a second as we talk about self leadership and the foundation of it. And for is it a normal process for leaders to come to an awakening at some place? They go years, they push it, they grind, they hit all their things, and then maybe they start to lose some steam. Burnout starts to creep in, and then they realize, wait a minute, I've got to take care of myself. Does it have to be that way? Is there a different process? How important is self leadership for the leaders?
Yeah, I would say self leadership is crucial, and different people get there different ways. I was blessed to have a father that very early on really believed in me, spoke life into me, and then funneled resources and taught me to read.
Mm,
And so, as a result, I turned around and tried to teach my kids, hey, I'll pay you $5 if you read a book, and read this
yep.
book, I'll pay you $5. And try to teach them to be intentional about their own self-development, because that self-development is crucial. It's crucial to a foundation in the way you lead yourself. It's foundational to your own leadership. I got a buddy. I've known him for years. I love the guy. Everybody loves him. He's got a great personality. He's fun to be around, and he's got great ambitions and great dreams, but he doesn't have great disciplines.
Mm,
And so as a result, he's always frustrated with where he's at financially, where he's at physically, where he's at spiritually, where he's at relationally. And then he'll do a reset, and what he does, he resets his goals, but he doesn't reset his disciplines.
mm,
And so he might for a week, but then it all falls apart. His disciplines fall apart, and then he struggles, like, why can't I reach these goals and these dreams that I have? And I think a lot of people have great intentions, they just don't have great disciplines, so they
wow.
never get to the place where they want to be or where God wants them to be. And I love what Proverbs 25:28 says. It says, like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. In the early ancient Near East, they put walls around their cities, and the wall represented safety, security. But when a wall was broken down, it represented vulnerability to attack. So our disciplines, Solomon's saying in his Proverbs, self-control is that wall. That discipline is a wall around you that can guard you from attack against those vulnerabilities and help you, live out the life that you want to live. But it does
Wow.
require discipline. I used to teach my kids all the time. I'd say, discipline is doing the things that you don't want to do now so you can become the person you want to be later.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
and a lot of people struggle with it, and we got to choose our pain. Here's the thing:
Yeah.
a lot of people, they don't recognize, well, it's just too hard to go to the gym every day, it's too hard to read 10 pages of a book every day, it's too hard to wake up and have a quiet time and spend 10 minutes with God every day, it's too hard, and so they don't develop that discipline because they're not willing to pay the price. And we get to choose our pain. Do I want to choose the pain of existing in my current situation? Or do I want to choose the pain of developing one habit, one healthy habit over the next 30 days, going to the gym 30 days in a row? It's going to be painful, but once you do it and you develop the habit, it's what I call crossing the discipline, the habit to the discipline to habit barrier.
Yeah.
I have to discipline myself for 30 days, but eventually you don't think about it. You just go to the gym, because now you've jumped from it being a discipline, I got to think about it, to a habit. I don't have to think about it. It's an ingrained behavior. And so I've been going to the gym for 24 years now, 23 years now. And yeah, the first, 30, 60 days was hard.
Yep.
But now it's just who I am. It changes your identity. It's not what I do, it's who I am. And so this is where people have to come to a place of in self-leadership. It's not just what I do, it's who I am. So
Mm.
like my goals every year, when I write out my goals, I write out an I am statement. So by my physical goals, I am an athlete. By my business goals, I am an entrepreneur. By my content creation goals, I am a learner. By my granddaddy family goals, I am a creative pops. My grandkids call me pops, and so I am a creative pops. And so I'm doing crazy adventures with them, creating YouTube story videos with them, where we
Mm.
create these little YouTube videos. We'll do crazy games. We did Fear Factor one night at the house. So they all came over, and I lined up all these Fear Factor things. And, we made them eat sardines and put dog food all over their chest and things like that. Put ketchup on their toothbrush and made them brush their teeth. We called it cockroach blood. Took giant Brussels sprouts, and they had to put giant Brussels sprouts in their mouth, and we called them dinosaur eyeballs, something like that. And so they're having a blast. Why? Because my identity says I'm a creative pops. So my behavior, I create fun adventures for my grandkids.
Wow. Ah, my goodness. So when a leader is putting forth effort, their self leadership is steady, it's in check, it's the foundation. How does that impact their communication? How does it impact their influence? Can a leader expect to see, those things elevate when the self leadership is there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think when self leadership is there, three things happen. Number one, it increases your confidence.
Mm.
It increases your confidence. Um, Second, it increases your competencies, because if I'm leading myself well, I'm growing, so I'm getting better in leadership. And then third, it increases my credibility. So if I spend time leading myself well, whatever that looks like for each individual's life, okay, if I'm spend time leading myself well, then just like the walls of a city, all of a sudden my vulnerabilities, I'm no longer as vulnerable as I was.
Wow.
The outcomes of my life are now being demonstrated. The consequences of self-leadership are being demonstrated. My confidence goes up, my competencies go up, my credibility goes up. Higher confidence plus higher competencies plus higher credibility equals higher influence with others. Because show me one person that leads themselves well, that people don't admire.
Yeah.
Lead yourself well, people have an admiration for it, because it's what everybody aspires to.
It's amazing though. People get beat down. They experience failure. They experience pain, whether it's physical pain, whether it's financial pain, mistakes, whatever it is. So they have this. Then the season happens where they get in this cycle of maybe the self leadership isn't there, and maybe they lose sight of how important their identity is. I had a leader on the podcast last year, wrote a book about identity, and it's still just amazing, right? How often we lose sight of the fact that we are the only one of us on the planet, and that in and of itself should be all the reason to take great care of ourselves, to invest in ourselves,
Yeah.
to we're one of one. But maybe speak
Yeah.
to those leaders for a second who've been in that rut, been in that down and out, trying to climb back up and know what they need. I mean, you've already given us such gold. Maybe expound on that a little bit.
Yeah. You've got to look inside and say, okay, what is my mission?
Mm.
why do I exist? Um, I don't think enough people look at that. You know, I was blessed early on in my life because my dad would tell me, you know, even as a kid, Mac, God has something special for you. Uh, he's going to do something special with you. Hey, my entire library downstairs, you go down there and read. Just pick a book and read. He bought me a stamp, and it said from the library of Mac Lake. And
Uh,
I'll never forget, when I was a teenager, he gifted me all his books.
oh.
I didn't have anywhere to put them except in his basement, in his library. But I went through every one of those books and I stamped it from the library of Mac Lake. And I felt pride and ownership on those books. And I would go down and I would read those things and grow. And so dad would always feed that in me. Well, then at 21 years old, I'd never heard of a life mission statement.
Mhm.
But I went to church one Sunday and I'm sitting there in church and I'm listening to this guy communicate. Phenomenal preacher, phenomenal communicator. And I was visiting this church and I was like, that's the way I want to communicate.
Mm.
And so I wrote down in my little journal, my mission at that point, my mission is to help people fall in love with the Word of God.
Wow.
I want to communicate in a way that causes people to fall. So that became a driving force for me. And so it's like that was my true North Star at that point. And so it drove me to self leadership. I want to grow in this. And I think a lot of people lose sight of why they exist, what
Wow.
their calling is, what their purpose is. And so they're waking up every morning and they're living life by default, not by design. And when you understand what your calling is, what your mission is, you wake up every morning and you live a life of design because I'm going somewhere, you
Yep.
know? Acts chapter 4, I love it. It says David fulfilled God's purpose for his life and he died. You know, that's what I want to be said. I
Mm.
want to fulfill my life mission and then just die, you know, because what a great life to be able to live a life of fulfillment, but a life of design. So over the years, my life mission statement has morphed. I changed it when I was 29. I built it out a little bit more at 29. And then looking back at age 49, 50, I rewrote my life mission statement once again because all of a sudden I look back at 50 and I was like, okay, now my 20s, 30s, 40s, everything makes sense. I see more and more God's purpose for me. So, you know, my mission is to encourage and equip leaders to become multipliers of multipliers.
Mm.
And so now that also becomes a filter for me. So I'll have people, you know, call me and say, hey, Mac, I would love for you to mentor me. And, you know, I can ask them some questions. And if I see they just want to grow as a leader, hey, great, I'll recommend somebody to you.
Yep.
If they want to be a multiplier, then I'm more likely to say yes because it's in alignment with my life mission. So
Absolutely.
filter, it becomes a drive. And it's like, man, I want to wake up every morning and learn this. Jason, I was speaking at an organization one day about leadership development. I was on site all day, working them through the exercises, the training, the processes, and all that. Got in my car at 9 to 4. Got in my car. I was driving home, had about a 4-hour drive, and it hit me. God whispered in my soul and said, Mac, you didn't say anything today that you never said before.
Mm.
I was like, ouch, ouch, ouch. And I recognized that moment. I've read more than anybody I know around leadership development. I've probably taught more hours on leadership development, not leadership, but how to develop leaders than anybody I know. All right. And I've spent my life learning this. And it, you know, right around that 54 years old, I think it was when that happened, I was like, God, I'm sorry. I'm going to take my 401 level and go reset it to a 101 level. That my 401 is my new 101 level. I'm going
Yep.
to grow up to a new 401 level, which means I have to talk to people I've never talked to. I have to ask questions I've never asked, and I have to read things I've never read, and I have to be exposed to organizations I've never been exposed to in order to grow to that next level. You got to
Wow.
challenge yourself.
Wow. Wow. My
You
goodness.
do that, increases your credibility with people,
Yes.
because now all of a sudden, when you're learning, when you go beyond the ordinary to the extraordinary level of learning, then you're leading from an overflow. I was studying this a few weeks ago. Proverbs chapter 2, Solomon says something very interesting. He said, search for wisdom like you would silver.
Mm.
I was like, okay, yeah, I've heard that verse. Oh, wait a minute. I was in Israel 2 years ago. I don't remember hearing anything about a silver mine. And so I start Googling. There's no silver in Israel. He wrote that from Jerusalem. There's no
Mm.
silver there. They mined copper. Copper was very easy to mine. And that's how they made their tools and their utensils and their weapons, out of copper. But they also, if they wanted to use silver, they had to go further. They had to go outside of the country. Mining silver was more difficult, so they had to dig deeper. And so what it hit me that morning was, oh my gosh, if I want to grow, to grow in wisdom, I have to go further than I've ever gone, and I have to dig deeper than I've ever dug. And that's what Solomon was communicating to us, because his readers would have gone, hey, there's no silver around here.
Right.
Oh man, what a we just think of it, oh yeah, I got to dig for silver. No, it's
Yep.
way more than that.
Wow. Wow. That is powerful. You brought up Maxwell earlier. For me, it was 1995, sitting in a conference center listening to him for the first time. I don't think he was a doctor yet, but I can still remember the talk. He talked about, are you a turkey or are you an eagle? And he went through the, two processes, and then magically this cassette tape showed up in my mailbox once a month called the Enjoy Life Club. Oh,
Oh yeah.
yeah, just incredible. But just the whole process of choosing to continue to grow, continue to lead, and we have all these different opportunities nowadays to do that, between books and podcasts and YouTube channels and every which way. Speak to, are there some practical everyday self-leadership habits that leaders, you got to make sure? We've talked about some of the physical ones, some of the intellectual learning. Are there any others that you go, yes, you got to make sure these are on your radar as you're pouring into your own self-leadership?
Yeah, I think there are several, but let me answer it this way. When it comes to personal growth, there are two approaches. Most people use what I call a dispersed approach to personal development. So, like, if we were to survey somebody in your audience today and said, "Hey, are you reading a book?" They'd probably say, "Yeah, I'm reading 2 or 3 books." What are you reading a book on? Well, one on money, one on leadership, one on health. Okay. Are you listening to a podcast? Oh yeah, I'm listening to podcasts. What podcast you listen to? Oh, one on marketing, one on communication. Okay.
Right.
Are you going to a webinar? Yeah, I'm going to a webinar. What's it on? Oh, hiring practices, something like that. And so they might be reading, listening, watching, attending, but they're over 30 days, but it's dispersed
Mm.
around 8 or 10 topics. So if they might be spending 10 hours in personal growth time, but dispersed among 10 things. So what we teach in our personal growth workbook is, hey, pick one competency for 30 days and build your growth plan around that one competency, and spend 80% of your discretionary time, your personal growth time, growing in that one competency. So it's deliberate focus, not dispersed focus.
Ah.
Okay. And
Yep.
so you pick one area. So like last month, mine was executing for results. All
Mm.
right, executing for results. So took the personal growth plan, built my plan, and said, all right, next 30 days, this is what I'm going to focus on. Now I can read other little things. I got a little book I'm reading at night that isn't on that, things like that. But 80% of my personal growth time is around that one thing. Now this month, it's a little different. This month, what I'm doing is it's a personal growth technique I call binge an expert. Okay,
Mm.
and so a buddy of mine turned me on to Dan Martell, and so I listened to a couple of Dan Martell videos, and I was like, "Oh, this guy's got some stuff I need to hear." So I'm on a trip this week. I'm in Jacksonville and had a long drive and stuff like. So I'm just binging
Mm.
in my discretionary time. I started at his most recent video, and I'm just going backwards. And so I'm listening to every video I can from Dan Martell and take notes, binging an expert, trying to catalog what can I learn? What do I want to take away from Dan Martell's wisdom? And so, binging an expert is one of my favorite ways to grow, to do personal growth.
Wow. Oh, that's just absolutely incredible. My goodness. Incredible. Hey, before I let you go and we turn the corner, every episode we ask leaders, same three questions. We're building this online communication leadership library. Leaders can go and be inspired to read, find a new speaker, those kind of things. So, leaders, we speak a lot and we all listen to speakers. Is there someone that just stands out for you? They check of all the boxes, they've helped transformed you. You highly recommend them to other people.
Yeah, I got that question ahead of time, and I'm answering it different than what you
Okay.
asked, but I think maybe it'll be helpful. And so I really don't have a favorite speaker. I love a wide variety, and so what I love to do when I started doing this when I was in seminary, because I had Dr. Howard Hendricks. He was
Mm.
my favorite communicator at that point. And so I took every class I could from him. And every day when I walked into his class, I would open my notebook and I would draw a line down the middle of my paper. All right, a vertical line down the middle of my paper. On the left hand side, I would take notes on what he was teaching. On the right hand side, I took notes on how he was teaching. And
Ah,
I still do that today. And so when I'm taking notes, when I'm listening to a communicator, I'll write down what they're saying. It's good. But I'm also taking note, how are they communicate? What do I like about their communication style that might fit my style? I don't want to
yep.
try to be them, but is there a transferable principle that I can apply? And so I watched Maxwell speak recently. We were at a conference and speaking together, and I sit back and I watched him, and I thought it's fascinating to see how his style has changed over the years. He sits a lot now, and he's very conversational, and it's fun to see that, and then to begin to ask, why, and dig into that. But what I recommend is whoever you're listening to, even a bad communicator, write down what do I learn
Yes.
from them about how they communicate.
Wow, that's powerful. I love that. If you're a podcast listener, no worries if you're not, but is there a guilty pleasure or a development one that you just keep coming back to? You find
Yeah.
yourself sending it to other people going, you got to listen to this.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, Justin Roethlingshofer, used to be an NHL health optimization coach for hockey players. And he and I were speaking at a business conference together, and we hit it off. We became friends. He starts coaching me in my health, and we've just become buddies. And he has a podcast, which is just so good, called The Own It Show, OWN, Own It, Own Your Own Health. And he just drops gold when it comes to health. Real simple stuff, very practical. Health is one of my areas of focus around self leadership. And I've been studying health for 23 years. I've only known him less than a year.
Mm,
I've learned more from him in the past, months than
yep.
than anybody from a long time. So he's really, really good.
Wow. So last one, probably the most difficult because you're a reader. So is there a book that you just go, boy, every leader, you got to make sure you read this?
Yeah, it's funny. I've said for years, if I was on an island and by myself, and I could only take one book with me besides the Bible,
Sure.
what book would I take? What book would I take? And it's Leadership and the 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard.
Mm,
Everybody's familiar with 1 Minute Manager. I find very few people are familiar with leadership and 1 Minute Manager. And he talks about situational leadership in that book and how you have to lead people differently. And that Dr. Hendricks made us read that book when I was in seminary. And it has been my favorite book since, let's see, oh my goodness, ever since I was, 28 years old. I love that book. And I've made many, many people read that book.
oh, I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. This has been incredible. I literally have taken 2 pages of notes. Incredibly inspiring. I just thank you so much for your generosity and how you share your wisdom. Where is the best place to send our listeners? Find your latest book, find the other series of books, find you online. Where can we send them?
Yeah, Mac Lake Online, MACLAKE online.com. And they can find everything right there. The newest book, Leading Yourself, and then the entire book series that teaches leadership competencies all the way up the leadership pipeline. All those books are there as well.
Absolutely incredible. Well, we'll link to all of that in the speakers group, Facebook group. We'll put it in our weekly communication guide and on all of our socials. Mac, seriously, thank you. This was an honor having you. Been looking forward to this for a long, long time, and really appreciate your generosity and just teaching us about leadership. So appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a joy to be with you today.
Thank you for listening to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. Thank you for leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And thank you for every like and every comment. Every single time you cut and copy a link and send it to a coworker or a friend, it absolutely means the world, and it helps each other transform our communication skills. Lastly, don't forget about a great resource that's available to you: our communication skills library. At the end of every episode, we ask each guest their favorite speaker, their favorite podcast, their favorite book, and we've compiled all of those resources together to give you an amazing library to continue your growth and development. Thank you again for being a listener and for being a part of the Speak with People community.